The bank manager's face went white when I asked to close all 7 of my accounts. Behind her, my ex-wife Jessica stood frozen in the doorway of her corner office, watching through the glass as I signed the withdrawal forms. Her new husband, Derek Patterson, the man who'd just told me to cut ties with his wife, was standing right next to her. He had no idea that the scruffy middle school dropout he'd just insulted was about to walk out with $70 million in assets. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how a kid who never finished 8th grade became wealthy enough to destroy a bank's quarterly numbers with a single signature. My name is Tyler Morrison. I'm 41 years old, and I look exactly like what you'd expect from someone who dropped out of school at 13 to help his dying mother. Rough hands, weathered face, clothes from department store clearance racks. The kind of guy you'd walk past without a second glance. Which is exactly how I've always liked it. When you grow up poor in a place like Harrisville, Kentucky, you learn early that showing off gets you robbed, and keeping your head down keeps you alive. I married Jessica Hartwell when we were both 19. She was beautiful, ambitious, working her way through community college while I was hauling construction materials for $12 an hour. We lived in a trailer park on the edge of town, eating ramen 4 nights a week and dreaming about someday having enough money to buy a real house. Jessica wanted to work in banking, had this whole plan mapped out. Associate's degree, then bachelor's, climb the corporate ladder, become a branch manager by 30. I supported that dream with every paycheck I earned. But here's the thing about dreams. Sometimes they cost more than money. They cost the person you used to be. By the time Jessica finished her bachelor's degree, I was running my own small construction crew. Nothing fancy, just 3 guys and a beat-up truck, taking on whatever jobs came our way. We weren't getting rich, but we were making steady money. Enough that Jessica could focus on her career without worrying about rent. She got hired at Cornerstone Bank as a loan officer, and I was so proud of her I could have burst. That first year, everything seemed perfect. Jessica would come home talking about interest rates and credit approvals, and I'd tell her about the deck we built or the roof we repaired. Different worlds, but they fit together somehow. We'd sit on our trailer's tiny porch, drinking cheap beer and planning a future that seemed just close enough to touch. The cracks started showing around year 3 of her banking career. Jessica got promoted to assistant branch manager, and suddenly our worlds weren't just different. They were incompatible. She started coming home later, attending networking events, joining professional organizations, and I started noticing the way she'd flinch when I'd show up at bank functions with dirt under my fingernails and calluses on my palms. The divorce came when I was 26. Quick, clean, no drama. Jessica said we'd grown apart, wanted different things, needed to find ourselves. All the phrases people use when they mean I've outgrown you but don't want to sound cruel. I signed the papers without fighting because what was I going to do? Force someone to stay married to me when they clearly wanted out? We didn't have kids, didn't have much property. She kept the car, I kept the truck and my tools. Fair enough. What Jessica didn't know, what nobody knew, was what happened 6 months after our divorce. My crew had been hired to demolish an old warehouse on the edge of town. Standard job, nothing special. But while we were clearing out the basement, I found something that would change my entire life. 73 contractor bags stuffed with cash, hidden behind a false wall. Drug money, obviously. Had to be from some operation that got busted or abandoned years ago. I stood in that basement for 20 minutes, staring at more money than I'd ever seen in my life. My guys were upstairs loading debris. Nobody knew I was down there. Nobody knew what I'd found. And I had a choice to make. Turn it into the police and get nothing, or take it and change everything. I took it. Let me be clear. I'm not proud of keeping that money. It was wrong, and I knew it even as I was loading those bags into my truck under cover of darkness. But I also knew that opportunities like this don't come twice. And I'd spent my whole life being honest, working hard, doing everything right, and all that had gotten me was a failed marriage and a bank account that never broke 4 figures. So I made a choice that night. I chose myself. Over the next 15 years, I turned that found money into a legitimate fortune. I started by investing in real estate, buying distressed properties, fixing them up, and flipping them. Nothing flashy, nothing that would draw attention. Small houses in working-class neighborhoods. The kind of investments that made steady returns without raising eyebrows. I paid taxes on every penny I made from those flips, making the money clean through legitimate business transactions. Then I expanded into commercial properties, small apartment buildings, retail spaces, a few office complexes. I hired property managers to handle the day-to-day operations while I stayed in the background. To anyone who bothered to look, I was just another small-time contractor who'd gotten lucky with a few investments. Nobody knew the full scope of what I'd built. By the time I was 35, my net worth had grown to just over $40 million. By 38, it was $60 million. And by this morning, when I walked into Cornerstone Bank to make a routine deposit, my various accounts held just over $70 million in liquid assets. Not counting the properties, not counting the business holdings, just pure cash sitting in 7 different accounts at the bank where my ex-wife had just been promoted to CEO. I hadn't seen Jessica in probably 10 years. We'd both moved on, lived our separate lives in the same small town, somehow never crossing paths. I knew she'd remarried some hotshot banker from Louisville named Derek Patterson. Knew she'd climbed her way up through Cornerstone's ranks just like she'd always planned. Good for her. I had no hard feelings about the divorce. We were different people heading in different directions. That's life. But this morning, walking into that bank in my work clothes, steel-toed boots leaving dirt tracks on their polished marble floor, I wasn't expecting what happened next. If you're finding value in this story, if it's making you think about assumptions we make about people based on appearance or education, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Hit that like button and leave a comment below about a time when someone underestimated you. Your engagement helps me bring you more stories about ordinary people discovering extraordinary truths. Now, let's get back to what happened when I walked into that bank. The lobby was busy with the usual morning crowd. People making deposits, talking to loan officers, standing in line for the tellers. I headed straight to my usual teller, a nice woman named Patricia who'd been handling my accounts for 3 years. She knew me as Tyler Morrison, small-time contractor who made regular deposits and never caused problems. "Morning, Mr. Morrison," Patricia said with her usual smile. "Business deposit today?" "Yeah, and I need to transfer some funds between accounts," I said, sliding the deposit slip across the counter. "Moving money around for a new project." We were halfway through the transaction when I heard a voice behind me that made my spine stiffen. "Patricia, I need you to pull the quarterly reports for review after lunch." I turned around and there was Jessica, 15 years older than when I'd last seen her, but still beautiful. Expensive suit, perfectly styled hair, the kind of polished appearance that screamed success. She was walking across the lobby with a tall man in an even more expensive suit, both of them deep in conversation about something involving commercial loan portfolios. Our eyes met for just a second. I saw recognition flash across her face, then something else. Discomfort, maybe. Or embarrassment. She quickly looked away and continued walking toward the executive offices, her heels clicking against the marble with authority. The man she was with, Derek Patterson I assumed, stopped mid-stride when he noticed where Jessica was looking. He followed her gaze to me, standing there in my dirty work clothes with my scarred hands resting on the counter. I saw his lip curl slightly in disgust. "Friend of yours?" he asked Jessica, loud enough for me to hear. "Ex-husband," Jessica said quietly, trying to move him along. "From a long time ago." Derek's eyebrows shot up. "That's the contractor you told me about? The one who dropped out of school?" I felt my face flush hot, not with shame but with anger. The way he said it, like I was some curiosity or cautionary tale Jessica had shared over dinner parties. Patricia finished processing my transaction, sliding the receipt across the counter with an apologetic look. She'd heard everything, too. "Have a good day, Mr. Morrison," she said softly. I nodded at her and started to leave, planning to ignore Derek's comment and get back to work. But Derek wasn't done. He stepped directly into my path, blocking my way to the door. "Listen," Derek said, his voice dripping with the kind of condescension rich people perfect over years of looking down on everyone else. "I don't know what kind of relationship you think you have with my wife, but it needs to end. She's moved on, built a real life. The last thing she needs is some reminder of her poor decision-making walking through her bank." I stared at him, genuinely stunned. Jessica had gone pale, pulling at Derek's sleeve. "Derek, stop. This isn't necessary." But Derek shook her off. "I'm serious. Why don't you do everyone a favor and cut ties with my wife? Find another bank. Hell, find another town. Nobody here needs to see proof of what happens when you quit school and waste your potential. The entire lobby had gone silent. Everyone was watching this well-dressed executive tear into a working-class contractor about his life choices. I could see pity in some faces, amusement in others. Patricia looked horrified. I could have told him right then. Could have mentioned the $70 million sitting in accounts just upstairs in his wife's bank. Could have explained exactly what I'd built from nothing while he was probably coasting on his daddy's connections and a business degree from some private college. But I didn't, because I learned a long time ago that the best revenge isn't making a scene. It's making a move. You're right, I said calmly, looking Derek straight in the eye. I should. Probably cut ties. Thanks for the advice. I walked out of that bank with my head high and my mind made up. Derek Patterson wanted me gone? Fine. I'd be gone. And I'd take every penny of my money with me. The first call I made was to my financial advisor, a sharp woman named Monica Chen, who managed my investment portfolio. I'd met her 5 years ago when I started diversifying beyond real estate, and she'd helped me build a sophisticated network of holdings that would make most financial planners weep with joy. Monica, I need to liquidate everything at Cornerstone Bank, I said, as soon as she answered. Every account, every CD, every money market fund, all of it. There was a pause. Tyler, that's over $70 million. Are you sure? The penalties alone for early withdrawal on some of those CDs will cost you nearly $500,000. I'm sure. Get started on the paperwork today. I want it done by Friday. Can I ask why the sudden change? I thought about Derek's sneer, about Jessica's embarrassed face, about 15 years of keeping my head down while people assumed I was just some poor dropout who got lucky. Let's just say I'm tired of doing business with people who don't value my patronage. Monica was smart enough not to push. I'll have the documents ready for your signature by tomorrow morning. You'll need to appear in person to close accounts of this size. That's fine. Set up the appointment for Thursday afternoon. Make sure it's with the CEO directly. These account closures require executive approval, right? For amounts this large, absolutely. Jessica Hartwell will have to sign off personally. Perfect. I spent the next 2 days making arrangements, called my business attorney to review the withdrawal paperwork, contacted 3 other banks about opening new accounts and transferring the funds, made sure everything was legal, documented, and absolutely ironclad. By Thursday morning, I was ready. The appointment was set for 2 p.m. I showed up 15 minutes early, wearing the same work clothes I'd worn on Monday. The same boots, the same jeans with paint stains, the same flannel shirt I'd been wearing when Derek told me to cut ties with his wife. I wanted them to see exactly who was taking $70 million out of their bank. The receptionist, a young woman who couldn't have been more than 25, looked me up and down with barely concealed disdain. Can I help you? I have a 2 p.m. appointment with Mrs. Patterson. Account closure. She checked her computer and I saw confusion flicker across her face. Mr. Morrison? That's me. I'll let Mrs. Patterson know you're here. She picked up the phone and I heard her say in a low voice, "The account closure appointment is here." Yes, it's actually him. I don't know. Maybe it's a mistake? I smiled to myself and took a seat in the waiting area. Around me, bank employees moved through their routines, probably wondering what a contractor was doing in the executive waiting area. None of them had any idea what was about to happen. 10 minutes later, Jessica emerged from her office. She was alone, thank God. I don't think I could have stayed professional if Derek had been there. She looked nervous, which was fair. She probably assumed this was some weird attempt to reconnect or cause drama. "Tyler," she said, extending her hand formally. "It's been a long time." I shook her hand. 15 years, give or take. Congratulations on the CEO position. You always said you'd make it. Thank you. She gestured toward her office. Shall we discuss your account closure? I have to admit, I was surprised to see your name on my schedule. I didn't realize you still banked with us. We walked into her corner office, all glass walls and expensive furniture. Jessica sat behind her massive desk while I took one of the visitor chairs. She pulled up something on her computer, then frowned. "Tyler, I'm showing 7 accounts under your name, but there's must be an error in the system. These balances can't be right." "They're right." She looked up at me, genuine confusion in her eyes. "But this says you have over $70 million across these accounts." $72 million, actually, as of this morning. Interest was good this month. Jessica's mouth opened and closed several times. How is that possible? You're a contractor. I mean, no offense, but even successful contractors don't have 70 million in liquid assets. I leaned back in my chair, enjoying this moment more than I probably should have. Turns out there's good money in construction and real estate investment if you know what you're doing. I've been building my portfolio for about 15 years. Started small, grew it carefully, kept my overhead low. Compound interest is a beautiful thing when you give it time. But you dropped out of school, she said, and immediately looked embarrassed. I'm sorry, that came out wrong. No, you're right. I dropped out of 8th grade to take care of my mom when she got sick. Never went back after she died. But here's something they don't teach you in business school, Jessica. Education and intelligence aren't the same thing. I might not know calculus, but I can read a property value trend better than anyone with an MBA. Jessica was still processing, scrolling through my accounts with growing disbelief. Commercial properties, residential portfolios, business ventures. Tyler, you've built an empire. A quiet one. That's always been my preference. She looked up at me, and I saw something like regret in her eyes. Why are you closing these accounts? Because your husband told me to cut ties with you. Suggested I find another bank, maybe another town. And you know what? He was right. I should do business with people who respect me. Jessica's face went pale. He said that to you? Derek told you to leave? Monday morning, right there in your lobby. Called me a reminder of your poor decision-making. Said nobody needs to see proof of what happens when you quit school and waste your potential. Oh God. Jessica put her face in her hands. Tyler, I'm so sorry. Derek can be... He grew up wealthy. He doesn't always understand. Save it, I said, not unkindly. I'm not here for an apology. I'm here to close my accounts and move my business elsewhere. I've already set up new accounts at First National. They were very welcoming, very respectful. Didn't once mention my education or appearance. Jessica pulled up another screen, and I saw her face go even paler. Tyler, do you understand what this will do to our quarterly numbers? 72 million in withdrawn assets will show up on every report. The board will have questions. Our shareholders will panic. Not my problem. Please, she said, and now there was genuine desperation in her voice. I just became CEO 6 months ago. I'm the first woman to hold this position at Cornerstone. If I lose a client of this magnitude in my first year, it will destroy my credibility. I felt a small twinge of sympathy. Jessica had worked hard to get where she was. But then I remembered Monday morning, remembered standing in that lobby while her husband insulted me in front of everyone, and the sympathy faded. You could have said something, I pointed out. When Derek was tearing into me, calling me a waste of potential, you could have stopped him. Instead, you stood there looking embarrassed that you used to be married to me. I was shocked. I didn't know what to say. Here's a thought. You could have said, Derek, stop being an asshole. You could have told your husband that not everyone measures success the same way. You could have defended the man you spent 7 years married to, who supported your dreams even when it meant eating ramen every night so you could save money for textbooks. Jessica was crying now, mascara starting to run. You're right. I should have. But please, Tyler, don't do this. We can fix this. I'll talk to Derek. Make him apologize. Whatever you need. I don't need anything except the withdrawal forms. She pulled out a folder from her drawer, hands shaking as she slid the documents across the desk. I have to ask, are you doing this just to hurt me? Is this revenge for the divorce? No, I said honestly. The divorce was 15 years ago. We both moved on. This isn't about our marriage, Jessica. This is about respect. Your bank employed someone who treated me like garbage, and you did nothing to stop it. That tells me everything I need to know about where I should keep my money. I started signing the forms, one after another. Each signature represented millions of dollars walking out of Cornerstone Bank forever. Jessica watched in silence, tears still streaming down her face. We were almost done when Derek walked past the office. He glanced through the glass wall, saw me sitting there with Jessica, and actually had the audacity to look annoyed. He opened the door without knocking. Jessica, what's going on? Why is he in your office? Derek, not now, Jessica said, her voice breaking. But Derek wasn't listening. He looked at me with that same contempt from Monday. I thought I told you to cut ties with my wife. He's closing his accounts, Jessica said quietly. All of them. Good, Derek said. Probably for the best. Maybe you can find a bank more suited to your economic level. I finished signing the last form and stood up. Actually, I found several banks interested in my business. First National was particularly enthusiastic about taking on a $72 million client. The room went silent. Derek stared at me like I'd just spoken in a foreign language. 72 million? Give or take. It fluctuates with market conditions. Derek looked at Jessica, who nodded miserably. Then he looked back at me, and I watched his face cycle through disbelief, shock, and finally something that might have been respect if it wasn't so clearly forced. Wait, Derek said. You're the Morrison account? The one flagged for executive review because of its size? That's me. The middle school dropout with no potential. Derek's mouth opened and closed several times. He looked like a fish drowning in air. You were wearing work clothes. You looked like a contractor? I finished for him. That's because I am a contractor. I just happen to also be a very successful real estate investor who understands that appearances don't define worth, unlike some people. I picked up the completed withdrawal forms and handed them to Jessica. These need your signature as CEO. I'd like the transfers initiated by tomorrow morning. Jessica signed with trembling hands, not looking at her husband. It'll be done by noon tomorrow. Appreciate it. I turned to leave, then paused at the door. Derek, you were right about one thing. I should cut ties with your wife. And with your bank. So, thanks for the push. Sometimes we need people like you to remind us what we're worth. I walked out of that office with my head high and my conscience clear. Behind me, I could hear Derek starting to argue with Jessica, his voice rising with each word. But it wasn't my problem anymore. Patricia was at her station when I passed through the lobby. She smiled at me, a real smile this time. Have a good day, Mr. Morrison. You too, Patricia. And hey, if you ever want to work for someone who appreciates good employees, First National is hiring. 3 months later, the fallout from my account closure was still making waves. I heard through the grapevine that Cornerstone's quarterly report had been a disaster. The board had demanded answers about how they'd lost their largest individual client. Jessica was on thin ice, her CEO position in jeopardy. Derek had apparently been given a stern talking to about client relations and was now teaching sensitivity training to junior employees. The irony was delicious, but the best part wasn't the revenge or the schadenfreude. The best part was what happened after. First National Bank didn't just welcome my business, they celebrated it. The branch manager personally handled my accounts, making sure I had everything I needed. They offered me better rates, better terms, better service than Cornerstone ever had. And when I mentioned I was thinking about funding a community education program for kids who'd dropped out of school, they immediately offered to match my donation. I started the Morrison Foundation with $20 million. The mission was simple: provide educational opportunities, job training, and mentorship for people who'd fallen through the cracks of traditional schooling. GED programs, trade school scholarships, business incubators for entrepreneurs without formal education. All the things I'd wished existed when I was a kid trying to figure out life without a diploma. The foundations. First graduate was a 17-year-old girl named Emma who'd dropped out to help her sick father. We got her into a medical assistant program, paid for her certification, and helped her land a job at the hospital where her father was being treated. She sent me a card that said, "You saw potential where everyone else saw a dropout. Thank you for believing in people like us." That card sits on my desk in my home office, right next to the first check I ever made to the foundation. It reminds me why none of this matters if you don't use it to help others climb up behind you. I never heard directly from Jessica again, though I did receive a formal letter from Cornerstone Bank's new CEO about 6 months after the account closure. Jessica had been let go, the letter explained, and they wanted to apologize for the treatment I'd received. They hoped I'd consider bringing my business back. I wrote a polite response declining and suggesting they focus less on appearance and more on character when evaluating both clients and employees. Derek, I heard, took a position at a bank in another state. Apparently, his reputation in town had suffered after word got around about how he'd treated me. Turns out small towns have long memories about who treats people right and who doesn't. As for me, I'm still doing what I've always done: running my construction crews, managing my properties, growing my investments. I still dress in work clothes and drive a 10-year-old truck. Still keep my head down and my business to myself. The only difference is now people in town know there's more to Tyler Morrison than meets the eye. Last week, I was at the hardware store picking up supplies when I ran into an old friend from my construction days. He'd heard about the account closure through the small-town gossip mill. "Man," he said, shaking his head in amazement, "I heard you walked into Cornerstone and closed out $70 million like it was nothing. That true?" "More or less." "How'd you do?" "It, Tyler? How'd a guy like us get that kind of money?" I thought about it for a moment. Combination of luck, hard work, and smart decisions. But mostly, it was about not listening when people told me I couldn't do something because I didn't have the right diploma or the right background. Turns out the best revenge against people who underestimate you isn't proving them wrong. It's building something so successful they have to acknowledge your worth whether they want to or not. He laughed. And closing your accounts in the process didn't hurt either. That, I admitted with a grin, was just a bonus. The truth is, I don't know if Derek or Jessica learned anything from what happened. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. That's not really my concern. What I do know is that I learned something important. Your worth isn't determined by your education or your appearance, or what other people think you should be. It's determined by what you build, who you help, and how you treat others along the way. I built an empire from nothing. I helped kids who dropped out get second chances, and I treated everyone with the same respect I wanted to receive. That's worth more than any diploma, any degree, any approval from people who judge books by their covers. Derek Patterson told me to cut ties with his wife and find another bank. Best advice anyone ever gave me, because it forced me to realize I'd been accepting less than I deserved for years, keeping my success quiet to avoid making waves, staying small to make others comfortable. No more. These days, when someone asks what I do for a living, I tell them the truth. I'm a middle school dropout who built a $70 million portfolio through real estate investment. I run a foundation that helps other dropouts find their paths, and I don't apologize for any of it. The Morrison Foundation just funded its 100th scholarship last month. A young man who dropped out at 16 to support his family just graduated with his HVAC certification and started his own business. He called me personally to say thank you. "Mr. Morrison," he said, his voice full of emotion, "nobody believed in me except you. Everyone said I was a dropout, a waste. You showed me that didn't matter." "It doesn't matter," I told him. "What matters is what you do next, and from where I'm standing, you're doing just fine." After we hung up, I sat in my office thinking about all the paths that led me here. The found money that started it all, the investments that grew it, the divorce that taught me about moving forward, and the insult that finally pushed me to claim my worth publicly. I thought about Jessica, working her way up in banking but losing sight of what mattered. About Derek, so focused on credentials and appearances that he couldn't see value when it was standing right in front of him. About all the people who'd underestimated me over the years because I didn't look like their idea of success. And I thought about that. Scared 13-year-old kid who dropped out of school to take care of his dying mother, who worked construction jobs for minimum wage, who thought he'd never amount to anything because he didn't have a diploma. That kid would never believe where he ended up. But here's the thing about success. It's not about the money, though the money helps. It's not about proving people wrong, though that can be satisfying. It's about building something meaningful, helping others climb, and refusing to let anyone else define your worth. Derek Patterson wanted me gone, wanted me to disappear, to stop being a reminder of his wife's past. Instead, I took $72 million and turned it into something that would help hundreds of kids like me. I turned his insult into a catalyst for change, his contempt into motivation for growth. That's the real revenge. Not destroying someone who wronged you, but using their negativity as fuel to build something beautiful. The next time someone tells you that you can't do something because you don't have the right background or education, remember this story. Remember that a middle school dropout from Kentucky became wealthy enough to tank a bank's quarterly numbers with a single signature. Remember that appearances don't define worth, credentials don't guarantee success, and the people who underestimate you are just showing you who not to do business with. And if someone ever tells you to cut ties, to move along, to find somewhere more suited to your level, thank them, because they just gave you permission to find somewhere better. somewhere that actually values what you bring to the table. That's exactly what I did. And I've never looked back. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you that worth comes from within rather than from other people's approval, please share it. Leave a comment about a time when being underestimated became your greatest motivation. And remember, the best response to contempt isn't anger. It's success so undeniable that even your critics have to acknowledge it. Thank you for listening to my story. Now go build something that makes people who doubted you wish they'd believe.